Honourable member from Calgary Fish Creek.
Well, Mr. Speaker, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Speaker, as a member for Calgary Fish Creek and the MLA and the health critic. I feel it's my democratic duty to stand up and speak on third reading on Bill 24. I think it's a privilege and an honour to speak in this House and debate future laws of the land. We, as members of this legislature, are entrusted with a sacred obligation to the people of Alberta. Quite frankly, Mr. Speaker, I'm disappointed with what I've seen from the government members. I can tell you what I've heard from the government members on this bill is, quite frankly, is nothing. Aside from the minister introducing his bill and amendments, we heard from, I think it was one government member, the member from Calgary Cross, and the rest of the government has been silent. There are 68 government members, and the opposition actually has been doing all the debating, bringing forward the amendments, and bringing the voice for the healthcare professionals who are the glue in keeping a broken healthcare system together. In all honesty, Mr. Speaker, I find this insulting, and I have to repeat that, insulting to the people of Alberta. Why hasn't the government members found the time to speak about the number one priority of Albertans? And that number one priority of Albertans is health care. There are a few possible answers to that one for me, Mr. Speaker. The first one would be that they are under maybe a gag order or a don't talk, don't debate order, not to say anything. How ironic that while the Health Quality Council investigates political intimidation of health professionals, political professionals are intimidated into saying nothing about health care. Isn't it interesting how it appears that a premier who ran on a platform of openness and accountability has maybe silenced her caucus colleagues on such a vital issue? Maybe the members just don't care. Maybe they think it doesn't matter what happens in this House and in the healthcare system. Is this legislation perfect just the way it is, like a unique snowflake? Hardly, Mr. Speaker. As soon as this bill entered Committee of the Whole, the minister tabled an amendment. So I'm going to move on from here, Mr. Speaker. Maybe the government members will join in doing their job. Who knows? Stranger things have happened. I find this bill to be a Band-Aid solution to a fatal problem. Our health system is in serious trouble. Doctors are being intimidated. Pathology test after pathology test is being reviewed. In the midst of all this, Alberta Health Services just closed the cancer lab at the Tom Baker Cancer Lab. World-renowned experts are being fired, let go, or their contract isn't being renewed. It's unbelievable. When I questioned the minister on intimidation in the system, something that the Health Quality Council is currently investigating, he lashed out and he stated, calling the testimonies of doctors innuendo. What is the word that pops in my mind, quite frankly, Mr. Speaker, is disgusting. I've shown proof of emails to Dr. Tony Malioco, being told by Alberta Health Service officials that he would regret it. I was absolutely stunned by the minister's response. He has managed to insult every physician that has been brave enough to come forward. Here. For this reason, I think the Health Quality Council Act is not up to the job of, or Health Quality Council is not up to the job of conducting an inquiry into queue jumping and political intimidation in the healthcare system. We need a full, public, independent, judge-led inquiry. And Mr. Speaker, you know who else agrees with me on that? The member for Calgary Elbow, the Premier. You know who doesn't agree with me? The Premier. Funny enough, they're the same person. What has changed? The member from Calgary Elbow actually won her leadership contest and is now in the Premier's office. The saying goes that power can go to your head. I'm not going to attribute this to any particular member of this House, but quite frankly, someone got lost on the way. The whole debate is ironic in another way for me because we're debating the Health Quality Council Act. We should be reading the final report from the Health Quality Council. The final report has been delayed until sometime in the new year.
After an election.
We could have started and finished a general election by then. Now, Mr. Speaker, my caucus will tell you I'm a forgiving person on most days. I've consulted in the past those with addiction problems, and I know how important it is to relieve the guilt of past mistakes. It's an important step to a better life. But to be forgiven, you must admit you've made a mistake. Time and again, mistakes get made by this government. And you know what? There's no recognition. There's just this collective amnesia, just living in the present and not worrying and remembering the past, even when confronted. I'd like to see a little humility. When asked in the media about the Premier's promise, her Chief of Staff was adamant that the inquiry would be led by a judge. There are no prescriptions here that ensure a judge will lead an inquiry into the health system. So what we are left with, the government's word. To be honest, you can't take that to the bank. Flip-flop after flip-flop has flown since the new Premier took office. Trust me, quite frankly, doesn't inspire confidence in Albertans right now, Mr. Speaker. What will inspire confidence, what will return the sense of trust that people have in the health system? A public inquiry. The doctor's prescription, a dose of truth with maybe a pinch of honesty. Because, Mr. Speaker, at the end of the day, Albertans in this province want to believe again. Health professionals want to believe again in their government and the healthcare system that they use and they take and pay for. Now, back on the topic of trust, Mr. Speaker, the government won't call a public inquiry because they think the Health Quality Council is capable of appointing a panel to investigate this issue. The government seems to be saying that they trust the council to do a good job and make good recommendations. Well, earlier this year, the Health Quality Council, at the previous Premier's direction, investigated the closure of the Edmonton City Airport. It seemed like a matter of putting something off to a committee so the government didn't have to deal with it. Well, the council did come back with recommendations, a couple dozen nearly. The consequences of closures were made clear, and the government had to take action to mitigate the impact of critical air flights. I haven't seen any action by this government on any of the council's recommendations on that issue. I wonder to myself, Mr. Speaker, what's the point of asking a council to investigate something only, quite frankly, to ignore their findings? This is my real concern with the Health Council investigating intimidation and other health issues. How do you know if the results will be taken seriously? Will they be acted on? How can we trust this government to fulfill its promises? At the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, all we can rely on in this world is our own sense of hope. I hope for the best. I hope this government gets this legislation right. And ultimately, I hope this government heals this health system that we so dearly care for. The minister mentioned in this debate their commitment, their unwavering commitment to this legislation. And he talked about the fact that Albertans are fair people. And there's no question about that. There are no better people in this country than Albertans. Mr. Speaker, Albertans want a public inquiry. So I'm going to challenge the minister under his legislation, Bill 24, that we know by the end of the day will pass. Under 17.1a, it clearly set out the nature and the scope of the inquiry, including, Minister, the date by which the report and recommendations, if any, of the panel must be submitted under Section 22. So, Minister, If you want to be fair, and you want to be open, and you want to be transparent, and you want to commit to Albertans, like you have said in this legislature, then our challenge to you, as far as the Wild Rose, and for that matter, our challenge to you from Albertans, is to have that report submitted before the next election.
Thank you. 29-2A is available. Seeing no speakers for 29-2A, I will call on the member from Edmonton Strathcona, followed by the government House Leader, followed by Calgary Mountain View, followed by Airdrie Chestermere, followed by Calgary Buffalo, and that's it for now. Honourable member from Edmonton Strathcona.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I'll be brief on this. I think we've talked about it at some length previously. The bottom line is the Premier, when she ran to be leader of the Conservative Party, promised a full public, judicially led inquiry. Instead of doing that, this legislation was introduced. This legislation does not provide for what the Premier promised. This legislation sets up a situation where a group of people who will themselves have been tasked with, in many cases, investigating the very issues that would subsequently be sort of inquired into, will be the group that decides whether their very work will be reviewed by a judge or not, and will decide whether the people that review their very work will be independent or not. So that whole process is remarkably open to unfortunate bad judgment and decisions that will bring into disrepute the true independence of the panel. As well, the panel, as we talked about earlier, will have countless opportunities to go in camera, not just for the intensely private, embarrassing public health issues or health care issues that speakers opposite have suggested were the necessary protections for individual Albertans, but for anything where the panel thinks the public interest might possibly be jeopardized should they not go into camera. So there's broad-ranging criteria that the panel, which is appointed through a less than perfect process, can use to go in camera. So this is not what the Premier promised. This is not what Albertans said they care about. This is not a guarantee of a proper public inquiry. It is, as the member from Edmonton Riverview put it, actually an elegant strategic move to avoid subjecting the Premier or this government to a true public inquiry or the true results of her promise being kept. And for that reason, we will be voting against this bill, as we have at all other stages.
Thank you. 29-2A is available. Seeing no speakers for 29-2A, I will go to the Minister of Human Services and Government House Leader.